Our resident lawyer, Despina Priala, of boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay, with us every Thursday. She's here to offer her legal expertise by providing general advice on the latest hot topics. There's plenty of hot topics around. She has experience spanning more than 25 years in the area of property and commercial law. And she joins us now. Good morning, Despina.
Good morning, Wayne. Good morning, Brooke.
Good morning. Hot topic it is, my goodness. So this one is all about parents working from home. A bunch of schools are closed at the moment, obviously forcing parents to work from home and take care of the kids at the same time, basically. So can a employer make a parent sign a declaration to say they're not supervising their kids whilst at home working? Can this actually happen, Despina?
Interesting, isn't it? I think there was a story about this recently, wasn't there? In New South Wales?
Yes.
I think a local council was trying or attempting to have their employees sign a declaration to that effect, where they're working from home and they're parenting from home too, because the mandate was and is, in some parts still, of course, that children have to be homeschooled or not go to school. Therefore, you have people working from home and you've got a parent from home. And that's difficult to do at the same time.
Trying to juggle because you're being a homemaker, you're being an employee, you're also being a parent, you're being a teacher, all at the same time.
All at the same time. And we are in very interesting times, aren't we? I think we can all agree the world has drastically changed from well over a year ago. So with change, people have to have a greater understanding and be flexible and reasonable and fair generally, and be logical. Because if the government is mandated that the children must stay home for a period of time, then they have to be home, they have to be homeschooled, they're online with their schools. And in terms of parenting, it's obviously going to be different whether your child is in, 6 or 7 in grade 1, 2 or 3 versus a teenager in high school, I would have thought, as, depending on the child. But, how much supervision do you have to give as a parent? But I think if we take a logical approach, it's a balancing act, isn't it? And we see this in different areas of law in the courts over time, where they talk about competing interests, and we talk about trying to get a balancing act between the two competing interests. So interest on the one hand with the employer. The employer now has to have, in certain cases, employees working from home for a certain period of time. Now, the employers want the employees to be productive, naturally, because they're losing money. If you've got employees at home and they're not being productive, then work isn't being done. It's detrimental to the business. So I understand that, and that's competing interest over here on this side. Versus, well, you've got another competing interest, and that is you've got a competing interest with parents who are employees who have to stay home and then have their children at home who have to be parented and supervised. So there's this balancing act because you've got state government regulating both issues. An employee has to stay home and children have to stay home.
Yep.
And who is going to manage it, and how are we all going to do this? And I think we really are all in this together, aren't we?
Supposedly.
Supposedly.
Yeah, meant to be.
Supposedly. So we really have to approach it logically and fair. And I think if an employer, as in this case, it was one of the councils in Sydney, as I understand, I think it was Bayside Council, that was requesting their employees sign a declaration to say, well, you're not going to spend your quote unquote work time parenting children. Well, how are you going to do that? To make sure that you get your 6-7 hours in a day through your work? I mean, that's a bit of an unreasonable request given the current mandates by state government.
100%. And what if, say if someone gets given this declaration form, could the council fire them if someone says, hey, this is super unrealistic? What would happen?
Well, I would have thought in that situation that the employee would be in a position to say it's not lawful and it's not reasonable, and potentially you're discriminating me against other employees who aren't parents, for example. I think that's very a real issue that employers and employees will need to deal with. So it is about, I have to come back to this balancing act. So there has to be a fair and reasonable balancing act between getting the work done by your employee working from home versus, well, yes, they've also got a parent from home because the children are home, and not just supervision, it's, they're being schooled at home as well. So there has to be a fair balancing act for the competing interests. And we just have to all work together, I would have thought. And the employers really have to be reasonable in their actions.
So I guess, are you suggesting something like, you've got a certain amount of work to do, and so long as you get that done in a week or in a day or in a month or whatever, then, your side of the bargain is taken care of?
Yeah, well, that's right. So it depends on the work, doesn't it? And how are you going to measure your quota and getting your tasks done? But perhaps setting more realistic deadlines, for tasks and duties that are assigned. I think that's very fair. And employers will have to reset, the clock perhaps. But, employees can't take advantage either of just being at home and just taking their time. So you can't spend all your time parenting and you can't spend all your time in work. It's very hard, isn't it? But, you have to sort of look at it in this situation. Another example perhaps to compare is if you didn't have children, but you had pets. Would you ask your employee to sign a declaration that you're not spending time talking to your pets? I mean, how far does it go? And that's why you just have to be fair and reasonable in these circumstances.
Yeah, of course. And reversing it, so say if someone isn't meeting their work requirements at all, say if the employee's been pretty flexible, but they haven't done any work in the week, it seems by the boss. Can they then go, you're getting sacked, or you're getting a warning in this case if they are busy looking after their kids?
I think because it's new territory, that you do need to be reasonable and not just simply issue or say, okay, well, we're going to dismiss you, because you could be slapped with an unfair dismissal claim. Yeah. I think because it's new territory and we're all trying to feel our way, whether you're an employer or an employee, and as these regulations are constantly changing, I just think that they need to approach it in a different way. So perhaps setting out, your boundaries, your tasks, your duties, doing the right thing that way, yes, and trying to make sure that that's, assessed correctly. And maybe things just need to be reassessed week by week or day by day as we go along.
Well, the other issue, of course, is that Sydney, I think we're up to week number 6 of lockdown for Sydney. Of course, Melbourne had, a number of them in a row over a 12-month period. So the longer these things go, I mean, obviously, it's going to cause even more issues. If you're going 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 10 weeks, and it just goes on and on.
That's why you need to reassess. So you need to reassess the benchmarks, as you were saying. You can't just sit around and do nothing. You are employed. You're getting paid a wage. So you can't do nothing, but you need to reassess perhaps those benchmarks, those quotas, those duties and tasks, given what's happening at the moment.
And I think open communication, if you're sitting there at home really struggling with 5 kids hanging off you, fair enough, but you have to talk to your boss about it.
Yes, exactly.
All right, that is Despina Priala from Priala Legal. Coming up, what legally defines a de facto relationship? Stay tuned.